Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something kind of interesting, something we don't usually like to talk about, failure, but we're going to be looking at it from like a totally different angle. We're going to be exploring the unexpected benefits, the upsides of embracing those moments when things don't go exactly according to plan.
It's really interesting how we're conditioned to see failure as like this huge, scary monster. But what if we could like tame that monster and
Wow.
make it work for us?
That is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So instead of looking at failure as like a full stop, we're going to be looking at it more as a pause, a chance to learn, and really, really a springboard to something even greater.
I love that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a shift in perspective, right? Instead of letting failure define us,
Mhm.
we get to define how we relate to it.
Yeah, exactly. And the first step in that process is, I think, understanding that while we can't always control what happens to us in life, we absolutely can control how we react.
It's like that old saying, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. But, sometimes I wonder if that 90% should be even bigger because our reactions really do shape our reality.
I totally agree. But, how do we actually put that into practice? Like when we're in the thick of it, when we're feeling disappointed, embarrassed maybe, how do we actually shift gears and see the opportunity in the failure?
Yeah. It's tough, there's no doubt. But think of it like this, like learning to ride a bike, you're going to fall,
Yeah.
right? Like that's inevitable. But each time you fall, you learn something. You learn to adjust your balance, how to steer better. You learn how to get back up.
I love that analogy. So
Yeah.
it's not about like focusing on the fall itself, but what we gain from getting back up.
Precisely. And each time you get back up, you're building resilience. It's like a muscle that gets stronger with every workout,
Yeah.
every challenge, every setback. It becomes an opportunity to practice perseverance, to develop those problem-solving skills, to learn to adapt and adjust.
Okay. Yeah. I'm starting to see how this can lead to some like serious personal growth. But even if we understand it intellectual, like you're saying, it can still be tough to embrace failure, like emotionally.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I think some ancient wisdom might come in handy. There's this philosophy called Stoicism that actually encourages you to not just accept failure, but like to love it.
Wait, love it. Like really, really love failing.
Well, not necessarily the feeling of failing itself, but rather the understanding that even the tough stuff is a part of a larger journey.
Yeah.
Like the Stoics were all about focusing on what we can control, our actions, our thoughts, our attitudes, and letting go of the rest.
So it's about understanding that even failures have a place in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, how do we apply that to our lives? Practically speaking, I mean, if I bomb a presentation at work, I'm probably not going to be like jumping for joy, you
Yeah.
know?
No, of course not. But maybe instead of like beating yourself up, you could ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience?
Yeah.
Or how can I improve for next time?
I do find that when I take the time to analyze a failure objectively, I always learn something valuable. But sometimes it's hard to get to that point when the emotions are still kind of raw.
That's where journaling can be like a super powerful tool.
Mm.
After a setback, take some time to process your thoughts and feelings in writing. Ask yourself, what went wrong? What were my expectations? What surprised me?
Yeah, it's like having a conversation with yourself, right? Like dissecting the experience and extracting those lessons. And
Mm.
I found that just, sometimes simply getting it all out on paper can really help shift my perspective.
Yeah, it can also help you to identify patterns in your thinking and behavior, which can be like incredibly valuable for personal growth.
Okay, so journaling is definitely going on my list of like embrace failure tools. But I'm curious, what about those like really big, scary failures that just seem to loom over us, the ones that keep us up at night, like making us afraid to even try in the first place?
Yeah, those are tough. Well, for those, the Stoics had another intriguing technique called premeditation of evils. I know it sounds a little ominous, right?
Yeah, a little bit, but I'm definitely intrigued. Tell me more.
Essentially, it involves mentally rehearsing, like worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
Imagine the absolute worst thing that could happen if you fail. Play it out in your mind. Explore those potential consequences.
That sounds terrifying. Why would I want to do
I
that?
know, right? It might seem counterintuitive, but by confronting our fears, like head on, we can diminish their power. Often the anticipation of failure is much worse than the
So
reality.
it's like taking control of our fear instead of letting it control us. I can see how that could be really empowering.
Yeah, exactly. And when you really examine those worst case scenarios, you often realize they're not as like catastrophic as you imagined, you know.
Yeah.
And plus, by mentally preparing for them, you're kind of developing a plan of action, right? You're building up that resilience muscle. So even if things don't go your way, you'll be better equipped to handle it.
So it's like having a fire drill for your life, right? Like you might not ever need it, but if you do, you'll be glad you practiced.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You know, this kind of ties into another fascinating benefit of embracing failure, I think. It can actually help us detach from the need for external validation.
Ooh, now that's something I think a lot of us can relate to. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. How often do we tie our sense of self-worth to our accomplishments? We think, if I succeed at this, then I'll be worthy, then I'll be valuable. But that puts an incredible amount of pressure on us, and it makes us terrified of taking risks.
Yeah, because if we fail, it feels like a direct hit to our ego, like to our very sense of self. And we're so afraid of being judged or rejected that we end up playing it safe. And that can really prevent us from achieving our true potential.
Exactly. Exactly. But what if we could separate our inherent worth as human beings from the outcomes of our actions? What if we could recognize that our value comes from something deeper, something intrinsic, regardless of whether we succeed or fail?
That would be incredibly freeing, yeah. Imagine being able to pursue our goals with passion and purpose without being constantly like weighed down by that fear of failure.
Wouldn't that be amazing? We could focus on the journey itself, on learning and growing along the way, without
Yeah.
being so fixated on the destination.
So instead of seeing failure as like a reflection of our worth,
Well,
we can view it as a stepping stone on the path to becoming the best versions of ourselves.
beautifully put. It's about recognizing that failure is not the opposite of success.
Yeah.
It's a part of it. It's a necessary ingredient in the recipe for growth and fulfillment.
This reminds me of that Stoic concept we talked about earlier, Amor Fati, the love of fate. It's not about loving the feeling of failing itself, but about accepting that even the difficult experiences are part of a larger, meaningful whole.
Yes. Yes, it's about trusting that life is unfolding as it should, even when we don't understand it in the moment. And there's a surprising sense of peace in that surrender.
It also takes some of the pressure off. If we can accept that everything happens for a reason and that even our failures have a purpose, we can approach challenges with a lot more grace and resilience.
And that acceptance can lead to a profound sense of gratitude, even for the things that initially seem like failures.
Yeah.
Because we realize that even our setbacks are opportunities for learning and growth.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to find the meaning, the lesson, the opportunity in every experience.
I love that. So it's not just about learning to cope with failure, but about actually finding the good in it. But isn't there a danger in taking this too far? I mean, what if we start using amor fati as an excuse to avoid responsibility for our actions?
That's a great question. And it's important to remember that embracing failure doesn't mean we become passive or complacent. It's not about, giving up or making excuses. It's about taking ownership of our choices and learning from our mistakes, even when it's hard.
So it's like a delicate balance, right? We're not condoning recklessness or dismissing the consequences of our actions, but we are choosing to approach those consequences with a growth mindset, looking for the lessons and the opportunities hidden within them.
Precisely. And that brings us to another benefit of embracing failure, I think. It cultivates humility.
Humility. How so? I usually associate humility with success, with recognizing that we're not perfect and that we always have more to learn.
That's true. That's true. But failure can also be a powerful teacher of humility.
Mm.
When we experience setbacks, it reminds us that we're not invincible. We make mistakes, we have limitations, and that's okay. It takes the pressure off of needing to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is humbling to realize that we don't have all the answers, that we're going to stumble and fall along the way, and that realization can make us more open to learning from others, more willing to ask for help, and more compassionate towards ourselves and others who are also going through their own struggles.
Exactly. It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level because we recognize our shared human experience.
Yeah.
And it helps us to let go of that need to always be right, to always be in control, which let's face it, can be pretty exhausting.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be human, to embrace our imperfections and to find joy in the journey. bumps and all.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And when we can do that, when we can shift our perspective from fear and avoidance to curiosity and acceptance, failure transforms from something we dread into something we can actually learn from and grow from.
So embracing failure isn't about becoming some sort of masochist who enjoys suffering. It's about recognizing that failure is an inevitable part of life and choosing to see it as a teacher, as a source of growth, an opportunity to cultivate resilience, humility, and even gratitude. So, okay, so we've explored like the philosophy right behind embracing failure and some of the like really profound benefits it can offer, But let's get practical for a moment. What are some like tangible steps we can take to shift our mindset and start seeing those setbacks as, as those hidden opportunities in disguise?
Well, we've already touched on a couple of really powerful tools like journaling and premeditation of evil. Those are great places to start, I think.
Right. Yeah, journaling helps us to process our emotions, identify patterns and extract like those valuable lessons from our experiences. And premeditation of evils, well, it might it might sound a little intimidating at first, but it allows us to face our fears head on, take control of our anxiety, and develop a plan of action in case things don't go as planned.
Exactly. And both of these practices can really help us to build resilience, that inner strength that allows us to bounce back from challenges and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. But are there other techniques we can use to cultivate that embrace failure mindset? Something maybe a little less, well, intense than imagining the absolute worst case scenario.
Oh, absolutely. One of the simplest yet most profound practices, I think, is to cultivate gratitude. Even in the midst of a setback, there's always something to be grateful for.
Oh, I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in the negative, to focus on what went wrong. But if we can take a step back and look for those silver linings, even in the midst of what feels like a failure, it can completely change our perspective.
Yeah, it really can. Maybe you learned a valuable lesson. Maybe you discovered a hidden strength or talent. Maybe you simply gained a deeper appreciation for the things in your life that are going well.
So gratitude helps us to shift our focus from what's missing to what we already have. It's like that saying, gratitude turns what we have into enough.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And when we approach failure with a grateful heart, it loses its sting. It becomes an opportunity for growth and learning rather than a source of shame or disappointment.
Okay, I'm adding gratitude to my toolkit for sure. But I'm also thinking about those times when failure feels so big, so overwhelming that it's hard to even imagine feeling grateful, What do we do then?
Sometimes the best thing we can do is simply acknowledge the pain, allow ourselves to feel the disappointment, the sadness, the frustration. You know, you don't try to suppress those emotions or pretend they're not there.
So it's not about like toxic positivity or forcing ourselves to be happy all the time. It's about honoring our authentic experience even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly, exactly. And often when we allow ourselves to fully feel those difficult emotions, they begin to lose their grip on us. We can start to process them, understand